All right, let's talk about promise.allSettled. Unlike promise.all, it actually waits for everything to either be resolved or let's change this to reject. And that's what allSettled means. Okay, so we have 2 fulfilled and 1 rejected when we call promise.allSettled here. All right, let's write our own function or polyfill for that. Let me go back to the console. So instead of promise.allSettled, I will call this myAllSettled. Okay, and we get an error because we haven't written that function yet. Since we're dealing with promises, it's going to be async function myAllSettled takes in promises array. Now we're going to let result be an empty array. Don't forget, we're going to return this at the very end. So we're going to return the result. Okay, so now that we have that, what should we do? Well, I'm going to take this argument promises and I'm going to set it equal to promises.map, and we're going to get access to each of the promise. Inside, we're going to return, okay, since we use the fat arrow with curly brackets, we need the return keyword. What are we returning? We're returning the static method, capital P promise dot resolve, and we're resolving each of these promise that we're mapping through. Now, even though we used a return, we can still do a dot then because it is a promise. Now, a lot of people forget that dot then actually has 2 arguments. The first argument is your resolve function. I'll call it res. And this is just going to be equal to an object. But I just want to tell you, when you're returning a whole object with arrow functions, you're going to get an error unless you either wrap it in parentheses, or you can do object and then wrap it in parentheses like this. I'm going to use the object way because it's more clear. Okay, so we're going to return an object for res and an object for reject like this. Okay, so let me move this down here. Okay, so the status will be fulfilled and the value will be res. Okay, now this for reject, let me just call it reg, just so it matches. Status rejected, and then oops, this should be a comma. I'm terrible. And then I'll call this reason should be reg. Okay, so now we have that, but we still have an error because now we have an array of promises. Now let's loop through those promises for a const promise of our new promises that we just mapped over. I'm going to say const the response or res will be equal to promise.resolve, the promise that we're looping through. Okay, and then const data will be equal to await the res. And then we can take this empty array result right here and do result dot push, and we're going to push in the data that we just did. Okay, line 17 promise. Okay, so now this, we're actually all done with promise.allSettled. See? But I want to improve it. You see our result is kind of messy. We can have like a bunch of fulfill or rejected. It would be better if our final result was just an object that says rejected, and it has an array of all the promises that's rejected, and then resolved, and has all of the promises of the promises that are resolved. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, we can actually do it with just reduce. Okay, so we can say result will be equal to result dot reduce, and reduce takes in the init and the next value. I'll do an arrow function, open it up. Now, the most important thing, I'm going to use the second argument as an object because that's what we want, right? So in here, we wanted to say rejected, empty array, and resolved as an empty array. Okay. Inside of our reduce, every iteration, we actually want to return our init. Okay, our init will be this object right here. Okay. And then right before that, we can say, hey, if next val. Remember, inside reduce, next val will refer to the next object in our array. Okay. And these promises have a dot status. If next val dot status is equal to rejected, right? What are we going to do? Well, we're going to take the init, because the init is this object. We're going to say init dot rejected dot push next val. Okay. Else means if it's not rejected, it's resolved. So then we can simply do init dot resolve dot push next val, like this. Okay, let's see what our error is. Line 30. Oh, how do you? Oh my god, I almost forgot how to spell that. All right, so now you see we have one rejected because this one was rejected. If we change it to resolve, and then we look, we have our rejected array is empty. Our resolved array has 3 of them that are fulfilled. Okay. Now, if instead of this, we try to get access to facebook.com, now we will have one that is rejected. And we can also see the reason for it. Type error. Message failed, right? Failed to fetch or something like that. Okay, I hope that was helpful.